Ariel Lauren, who is the CEO and founder of 100K Incubator. And I will pass it over to you, Ariel.
Thank you so much. So we had a lively, I feel like, discussion when it came to Mrs. Bailey's group. But I think overall, just to kind of open the floor and just to hear from all the facilitators in terms of what it is that you discuss. Um, One, I'm so grateful for even just a meeting on a Friday, like this. I think it's really important because these issues are so big and sometimes it can feel so overwhelming that we feel like we can't do enough or we don't know where to start, and I think that sometimes with the little things, one of the things that we talked about, inside of our group is like, okay, just being very intentional about, where you eat, where you drink your coffee, really just patronizing small businesses, being very thoughtful about those things, especially during this time where every dollar, really, really counts when it comes to sales. And so I'd like to bring Mrs. Bailey on to kind of give a recap a bit of some of the things that we discussed, and I'm happy to chime in as well, just to get started.
Well, thank you, because I thought we were all over the place, but um, it looks like there are many sides to it. One is the government and getting government loans, but I kind of changed the focus to how do we tap into the vast resources of American wealth, and how can nonprofit organizations like like Rotary, other organizations like that, how can we get those organizations to be aware of and financially support small businesses to grow and thrive, and the creation of a community, a commitment of the community to help the businesses grow and thrive is very important. How can that be done? We didn't solve it, but we did talk about, the idea of commitment, personal connection, going to a coffee shop rather than a 7-Eleven. Although a 7-Eleven is even a community, but I mean, it's a corporation, but that sort of thing. We're sort of getting the, and I was most interested in one of our members is looking to activate a YouTube channel and where she can go to get help with this. So she's not doing all of the technology. And she said, looking into a program where colleges have interns who can help. And there are two levels to that. There's the technology and there's also the business part. And then I mentioned that some high schools are even doing things like that. And in these times, there isn't money to pay the interns, but they need to learn the experience. So it seemed like our group was all over the place. So Ariel, can you summarize for me, please?
I think you did a fantastic job. I think listing out, kind of the different points throughout the conversation. So yeah, I think that was great. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right. And then we'll bring up Natalie next.
All right, well, we're going to keep the excitement going because we are ready to break the mold and step away from the conventional, traditional approaches and create our own pathways and lifelines going forward. So we were really fortunate to have Teresa in the room, who was our opening speaker, and she was actually able to share a little bit more. Anyone who has the heart and passion and soul to launch and go into small business is a special person to me. We all agreed it takes that great courage. We had some fellow business entrepreneurs in the room who could feel the love, and we sent a lot of positive energy Teresa's way. We really talked about some real important things. First of all, allyship with resources. Really finding allies, reaching out to people and being generous yourself to offer resources to others. Whether or not you think they'll use it, I think what's most important is to make known what you have discovered, not keeping the good news to yourself, posting it, sharing it, inviting people to comment on it. If you know about resources or someone who's offered resources, share it with someone. We also talked about the benefits of grant diving and seeking versus loan applications. And the message is go with the grants because you don't have to pay them back. And you should be able to find something out there that sort of matches your profile, or you can match yourself to their profile. But look into grants, don't overlook them, apply in multiple, quantities, and just keep at it. We also had Jeff in the room, who runs his own business and consulting, and really has a mastermind going about a different way to organize business. And so it was more of a circular, concentric, with connecting points, right? We're walking away from that big giant business model, the monopoly, and looking really at how small businesses can really align themselves together to be more of a consortium in terms of what you offer, reflecting on the model of a flea market, right? We have one space. We're going to share it. We're going to share the costs, and we're going to maximize the outcome by helping each other to share this space. We talked about ghost kitchens and looking, and this is particularly because we were trying to brainstorm a little bit for Teresa, looking at where she might be able to operate her business and reducing her expenses. So if there was a ghost kitchen or somewhere else where you can use their resources when they're not, and so forth and so on, we got to look at doing things differently. And sometimes it means shaking it up and taking a non-conventional approach. We also talked about, one of our entrepreneurs said, hey, guess what? I've got one steady Eddie who's kept me afloat for a number of years. I don't see major business coming in the door, but I worked hard to create a long-term relationship. And if you have a nose for sniffing out an opportunity, it might not be shiny, bright, and sparkly, but it may be something that is a sustaining lifeline. We need to do that. At the end of the day, I think any business going out there, our Black, Indigenous, people of color, we need to be building in first thoughts of resilience, because we're clearly seeing that we're at the bottom of the food chain in terms of help and resources. When our opening speaker talked about not qualifying for the PPP because she had not been in business that long, she didn't have a humongous payroll load, which is, strong determinants of you being approved. It just really breaks our heart. So what are some of the things going into business that our businesses can think about, and what lifelines can be put in place even as they're going into business? So there's some side agreements with other small businesses of Black and Indigenous people. We're going to create a safety net for each other. So we may have our own thing going in, but there is a soft agreement that one of us is in trouble, we leave no man behind. We're going to make it happen differently. We also talked about curating special focuses on different groups of people. So maybe it's, in this case, creating a unique line of gelatos for the veterans or the military, or college campuses, college kids, sororities, sports organizations, because people like little novelty approaches to the same type of thing. And we already have a unique product because it is a good natural food that tastes delicious. Finally, we talked about bringing the neighborhood to you, really getting to know who is in your neighborhood, who's around you, who are the people, where do they fit on the circle for you, and kind of focusing your energy on building those sustainable relationships that make sense. So we want to think in terms of rewriting the script. The business plan for the traditional business is not always very helpful for businesses owned by Black and Indigenous people of color. And so we need to do it the way Mama would do it. If it didn't work for her, she was going to do it her way. and she was going to talk about it too. So rewriting the plan, following non-traditional approaches, writing, sharing, posting, sharing so that other people can hear your story. Maybe you're now creating a bridge behind you and amplifying yourself while you're doing that, but not doing it alone. You are not alone. We don't want to be alone. That's it. Drop the mic from this room.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. And last but certainly not least, Dr. Clifton.
So we had a group that that immediately got into a problem solving mode, and one of our first members talked about the idea of having a kind of cooperative group of experts that would be available to Black and Indigenous members, and it would be made up of different goods and services, where if somebody need marketing advice or accounting advice, we would put this, to have this group together, and they could trade off and on, these goods and services that what were needed. Because we were sort of, I was been exposed to the PPP loans on many different levels, and on some levels it's quite easy if you have the right accountants and right connections to the banks, which Black and Indigenous people generally not had that connection. I've seen a lot of big grants be given out, and you don't even have to have a big payroll. It can be because you can be the only person on the payroll if it's an individual business, but you all have expenses that goes into it, and it becomes but to share this knowledge, to just broaden it out, and people, it would be a consortium of community members sharing their knowledge with that. So that was a wonderful suggestion, and it was also brought up that that it's an auspicious time to put these into effect, because people have been awakened from through George Floyd and the total. We were more susceptible to witnessing the racial injustice and really feeling it, and took to the streets. And so there's a time that we have to continue with this action. Another member talked about that some certain parts of the group were just unaware of things, of using Black and Indigenous businesses, and that groups and communities could develop a kind of develop flyers and get information out into the streets for people, so that they know of it. Because a lot of people are, might not have access to the technology that informs other people, and maybe we don't even see a lot of that being informed on it. And then another was an amazing story by one of our members who worked in a company that was non-profit, but profit-making company that was maybe 500 to 600 employees, that was not very socially conscious of these problems that we've been talking about. And a group of these people in this company got together and developed a social conscience, a letter, and got people to sign on it. And they maybe had like 80, 90 people in the company, start to protest to the management that, there's no social conscience here. We have to look at the vendors we use. We have to expand and develop a consciousness of I'm going to have a howling dog in a second. Hey, Ellie, excuse me. Ellie.
This is our real life pandemic life. It's an authentic space. It's Natalie Bordio.
That's what we have to howl and get what they're entitled to. But it's so this company, and through the actions of it started, and she used the word a small voice grew into a large voice, and it sort of transformed this company into like a a social action dynamo in a way. And, they're very conscious of who they give contracts to. And they're looking at, minority businesses to give contracts to. And it's like this small voice that grew into a larger voice and a wonderful example in a community that things could spread and develop social consciousness. And, that was a very, very inspiring. This is a dog that was we rescued and we just have her for a week or two, and she's not getting used to being here because she was like rescued from a puppy mill. So anyway, so she's a little. I apologize for the howling, but she's sweet.
Totally, totally well said. But yes, I think that what you were saying is fantastic. It's great. I think it's definitely important for us to think through resources and yeah, and just be, I think, more deliberate with that as well.
Yeah. So so we can see that just in the small group, there's a lot of ideas again. How to disseminate it becomes a question. But it's certainly things we could overcome. Another member pointed out that when there was all this discrimination against the Muslim population, where the lawyers just came out in mass and offered specific services to help them with these political problems. And we have to try ways to delineate specific services that are needed by these smaller businesses, so that we can get volunteers and we can get communities involved in that. And I think that's a very possible approach. And then we have to keep the pressure up. We have to keep like the dog howling. We have to not stop. That this is your right, and you're part of America, and you made up America. So and we have to instill that we have to get what is entitled, and make it an entitled, and make it an understanding psychologically that people deserve this and are entitled to this. So it was a pleasure for our group. I've always learned many things from them. And so I'll turn it back over to you. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Clifton.
Mm.
And I think with that note, just about us all being intentional about howling, right? And I think for me, I'll give you all a little bit more background about who I am and what it is that I do. And so I'm the CEO and founder of 100K Incubator. And I started, this particular platform. We're the first business funding mobile app created for women. We're in the process even now of growing our mobile app, building upon it, strengthening the technology, and really working to integrate with a lot of different financial institutions. But the mission behind what we do is that I think often, even within the conversation of small business, especially if we're looking at the way that the government classifies it, there are small businesses and then there's micro businesses. We specifically focus on micro businesses that are earning under $100,000 in sales annually. And it's often, those women entrepreneurs who are pre-revenue, so they have great ideas, they've maybe started working on their businesses, but they're struggling to kind of get off the ground, all the way to those who were able to get off the ground a little bit, but still aren't pushing through that six-figure sales mark. And so for me, the first thing is we have to talk about funding. We have to talk about, money. And one of the things that is said about, in particular, Black entrepreneurs is that we are over-mentored and underfunded. And so while I'm totally here, for all of the great advice and coaching and all of those things, at the end of the day, I'm like, where's the money? Where's the money? And I think that that's the pressure, that's the howl, that has to come from within us, right? So whether we're talking to our representatives, whether we're putting a president, in the White House, at the end of the day, as small business owners and people who care about micro business, let me be even more specific, as people who care about micro businesses, where's the money? Where's the capital? Where's the funding? When we are thinking about, PPP applications, as an incubator that focuses on funding and has helped women entrepreneurs gain access to over $5 million in capital, we were right in of, helping women entrepreneurs at that micro level under 100K get access to PPP funding and EIDL funding. And when those guidelines first came out last year, it was so just incredibly frustrating, to navigate. And this is coming from someone, I went to business school at Harvard. So I know how to read documents. I know how to prepare things. Like it's not that. But when you have, administrations who are not communicating clearly, with the people who are responsible, to disseminate the funds, these banks. And then you have banks who really truthfully are in business, due to much larger businesses, allowing their capital to kind of sit within their financial institution. Who are they thinking about in terms of priority, unless they're receiving pressure from the government to not do that? And so there's a lot of things that we've watched slip through the cracks as usual. And of course, the saying goes that if America has a cold, well, then Black America has the flu, or something along those lines, right? So all of this to be said, when we think about funding, micro businesses, when we think about funding, people like Teresa, who, we had a couple of those as well, had just started their businesses. We're starting to, kind of get off the ground, but just didn't qualify based off of, the guidelines that were put into place. And let's also be clear that the guidelines were put in place by people who were not micro business owners, who didn't understand, what actually was going on, what actually goes on within micro businesses. Even the way that, PPP guidelines, previously up until this week, and even still, it's still a little cloudy in terms of what's actually going on. PPP guidelines were based off of net income. And at the end of the day, everyone knows that micro businesses, definitely write off, so many, expenses just to bring their tax bill down, as any business, does. So it's not an accurate depiction when you look at net income in terms of what is actually required to keep a business afloat, right? And so if we're thinking about those things, right, if we have the right people in the room who are advocating, for micro businesses to say, hey, you can't judge this off of net income if you're really about providing support. And even with those who were, judged off of, payroll expenses, as Teresa said, payroll expenses are not the only things that keep businesses, that help keep businesses afloat. And so there were so many things that were just happening and have been happening over the past year, that we got to see kind of front and center, that we have to do a better job at holding our government responsible in terms of how they fund and capitalize, small businesses. And it's not enough to just, try to attempt to cover 2.5 months of someone's payroll expenses, or 2.5 months of someone's, net income. We have to do a better job at making sure, that they fully understand that they work for us, and small businesses and micro businesses are what keeps this country afloat. And so if that is the case, then we need more than just, PPP applications. We need more than just EIDLs. And we have to be the ones to say, no, we're in the middle of a pandemic, putting all this paperwork and all of these requirements, up is not the way to go. That's not how, we're going to be able to impact change. And so for us, kind of being in the middle of that, those are some of the observations that we saw. I think that all of you all had, fantastic, feedback. You had great conversations. And at the end of the day, as citizens, there probably are about 3 things that, we can do. One, we can be more intentional about our personal actions. Everything always starts with personal, right? And so even just, making a deliberate point, as, many of us said tonight, to, shop at small businesses, buy from local, businesses. You'd be surprised how even just, remembering that you don't have to order everything off of Amazon. Sometimes you can go to the farmer's market locally, and patronize that person who paid to be able to connect with local community members like you. So that's just something small that you can remember. And yes, sometimes it does feel a little bit inconvenient because Amazon can have it to your doorstep, like that. I also want to recognize that some of us have disabilities, and, that convenience is, part of, how we maintain, our health. So I want to acknowledge that as well. But for those of us who are physically able, to be able to go and patronize small businesses and to do a better job at, doing that, I think that we can all, rise to that occasion. So that's the first thing. The second thing is to not back down. Don't let your government, tell you that they don't have the funds and they don't have the capital. They absolutely have the capital. They need to reallocate budget. And so this is not an issue of the US government doesn't have money to be able to fund small businesses or invest in small businesses or micro businesses, even at the pre-revenue stage, even at the early stages. The US government definitely has it. And so I heard a lot of conversation kind of referring back to obviously the very hot summer that we had when it came to the murder of George Floyd, and, all of the Black Lives Matter, protests, that were happening around the country. And there was a big rally cry to defund the police, which really shook a lot of people, even the moderates, I like to say, who like to kind of play kumbaya in the middle. It shook them to their core, right? Because the idea that everyone has been raised with is that we need police. Police are here to protect us. And, you can't defund the police because then the communities are going to become unsafe. But when you actually take a look at the budgets, when you actually see how much your tax dollars are being allocated to defense spending, and you see just the little bit of portion, like that 20% that's actually going to social services and programs to help the people, you kind of will start to have a different, outlook, right? And so it's like, all right, well, instead of you all taking 80% of, kind of all of the tax dollars and going into this government, how about we try 50% and see where it gets us, right? And so no one is saying abolish the police, even though some people might say that. Which historically, I could also understand that as well, which is a whole other conversation. But we are saying that there is capital available to help small businesses. There is capital available to help micro businesses. And so we have to pressure our government into making sure that on the local level, the county level, the state level, and the federal level, that they're pulling resources to the people who really need them and the people who drive the community. And part of that community is definitely, small and micro businesses. So that's probably the second thing that I would definitely say. The third thing that I would say is from, an education, standpoint, and doing our best to, one, continue meeting and talking with each other. I think that part of what's kind of happened, especially as we become separated from a lot of indigenous kind of oral histories and oral habits, is that the conversation and transmission of information and the concept of education has become so institutionalized. And while institutional education is fantastic, and if you are blessed with the privilege to be able to, go to university or, do those things, that's fantastic. But the way that education is really disseminated, is by being in conversation with each other, right? And so it's meetings like this that bring us together, that allow us to kind of share, like, okay, well, this is what I heard, and this is what I think is going on, and what did you hear? And also hearing from people who have different lineages of education, right? So people who may not have gone, to university, or who are educated in a completely different way and have different life experiences. Community conversation is essential. And so if we're going to stay connected, if we're going to heal this country, if we're going to do the work, on the ground, so that in the next decade or 2 decades, et cetera, because this is going to be a long fight, and it has been a long fight, to see just even more progress, we have to stay in communication with each other, to make sure that, we're moving as a unit, and not just as a bunch of individuals. So those are the 3 things that I would say. And I definitely want to thank you all for having me here. But I'm super excited just to see what it is that you all are doing. And I truly wish you the best, and say, keep going, keep talking, keep forging forward, because we definitely have a lot of work to do, and micro businesses and small businesses need you. Thank you.